Hey everyone, Maz here, and I'm back with my man Foch. Foch, what are we doing today?
Today we're talking about everything you need to know about humidors.
From choosing a humidor, from seasoning a humidor, and everything you need to know how to properly maintain that humidor. Let's start off with obviously why you need a humidor, right?
Yep.
So I need to tell our subscribers out there why it's imperative to have a humidor.
So obviously you need a humidor to keep your cigars fresh. Your cigars will not stay fresh outside of a humidor. You need to maintain the proper humidity when choosing a humidor.
Exactly, and you know the reason why we're covering this subject is because I think of all the questions we get, we probably get the most about this. Because let's face it, cigars are an investment, right? It's part of the hobby, and to properly enjoy your investment, you want to make sure they're protected.
Right.
And a humidor obviously gives you that protection, that insurance that basically your cigars are going to smoke properly all the time.
Right.
So let's start off with maybe the picking of the humidor. When it comes down to it, let's talk about sizes of humidors, right? So, you know, you got small, medium, large, extra large, and some matters, and obviously then you get stand-up cabinets and all. So a question that we get all the time, and you probably hear it all the time, is what size should I get, right? And what do you say to somebody when somebody poses that question to you? Like, what size should I get?
I mean, I usually tell them, obviously I explain the size and how many they hold.
Right.
So, you know, I'll tell the customer, listen, I would get a humidor that's going to hold probably a little bit more than what you need or what you think you're going to hold.
That's a pro tip, right? Because a lot of times, once people realize that you're an enthusiast, right, they're going to probably get you the gift of cigars in the future. So yeah, you might personally only keep, you know, 10 to 15 cigars around at a time, and most small humidors, they say 25 to 30 cigars it'll hold.
You're going to outgrow that fast, by the way.
Well, if you get a box of cigars, they're usually a minimum of 20 cigars, right? So there you go.
Yeah.
So now you're over your limit. So, you know, I always say go a little bit bigger without going crazy than you think you're going to need.
Right.
So that's a good rule of thumb. So some people might say, you know what, I'll never outgrow a small. Small is where I need to be. And listen, so be it. You know, you might keep a few at a time. And that's everyone's different when it comes to how they embrace the cigar, world. Like whether you're like a once a month smoker, whether you're a once a week smoker. But I think as people, as cigar enthusiasts go, on average, you know, you're smoking a few cigars a week.
Yeah.
I think you could outgrow a small humidor very
just
quick.
trust us. You're definitely going to outgrow that small humidor.
Yeah, but
you're going to want something a little bigger.
To each their own. And I understand baby steps when it comes to that. But again, you have to think about it down the line, because when you're investing in a humidor, it could be something you have for a very long time. I mean, I know people that have handed down, like generationally, handed down humidors, you know, from generation to generation, because they will last. You get a quality humidor, it's going to last you a long time. So don't be afraid to actually make that leap in the beginning.
Right.
So when it comes down to size, the rule of thumb is probably go a little bit bigger than you're thinking, just to make sure you're safe, just in case people, you know, get you the gift of cigars, and you have an opportunity, because as you get into it and you realize you really enjoy it, you're probably going to wind up smoking a little bit more than you think you are.
Yep.
So that's a good rule of thumb. And then when it comes down to finishes of humidors, people talk about that a lot. A lot of times the humidor obviously on the inside does its same job.
Right.
It's, you know, it's meant to keep the cigars fresh and sealed properly.
Yeah, the outside is more aesthetics.
It's aesthetic. So really, where you want to use it, you know, how does it go with the decor if you're going to display it on an end table and such. That really, the finish is really up to you. That's why there's a multitude of different choices out there from a finisher's perspective. But when it comes down to finishing, it really depends on your personal taste.
Yes.
Some people like lighter woods, some people like exotic woods, some people like a matte humidor that has no gloss finish, right? So it really comes down to it. But in reality, as long as it's doing its job, which is keeping your cigars fresh, that's all that matters. That's all that matters.
Yep. And there's a ton of options when it comes to brands for humidors.
Correct. There's different levels. Obviously, you have something like Ellie Blue, which is like, you know, top of the line, exquisite humidors, handmade in France. I mean, they're actually like works of art. All handmade, phenomenal humidors. Right, then you have like Savoy Executive, which is an exquisite humidor, high caliber, well-made humidor, does a phenomenal job, heavy wood, solid wood, and then Savoy is a great brand. There's Savoy Executive, then you have the regular baseline Savoy. which comes in a ton of different finishes, which I love about it. And for me, that's a perfect starter humidor.
It comes in 3 different sizes also.
Actually 4. So small,
large,
medium,
that's right, 4
large, extra
sizes.
large. And the cool thing about it is like, you know, as you're getting into it, you're not going to know if you're fully committed to, like, you know, being a cigar enthusiast long term.
Sure.
So that's the entry level. But I know people that have, you know, purchased Savoy humidors, baseline, and really never really needed to evolve beyond that because they do the job.
Sure.
Now, it comes down to anything else. Like, you know, if you want to elevate your game a little bit, then you go Savoy Executive, right? And then obviously you want something that's going to be like a true conversation piece, something that's like truly like a work of art.
Sure. Then you go to
LE Blue. I mean, you know, it's beautiful. You know, it always gets the best of like Rob Report, exquisite handmade humidors. So there's all different tiers and levels, but always keep in mind, they all have to have the same function. They have to seal right and keep your cigars fresh, right? And then at that point, everyone has a different budget in mind.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's to each his own, size-wise, finish-wise, the caliber of humidors, you know. But for me, that Savoy is the perfect entry-level humidor where price meets value, and I think that's a great jumping spot because there's a lot of, and we've seen it before, there's a lot of humidors out there that are kind of like glorified jewelry boxes. Yeah, they come in an extreme budget, but in reality, they don't seal well. So yeah, okay, you got a bargain humidor, but in reality, if it doesn't do its job, what's the sense of it? It's not going to protect your investment.
Yeah, I think the most important thing when it comes to humidors, you want to get a humidor that seals properly, which obviously will keep all the moisture in the box, and let none escape.
Yeah, and for us, it's just years of experience at this point. Like, these are our tried and true kind of go-to brands that we've seen great success with. You know, we've seen many people enjoy them, and the good news is, like, no one comes back and says, you know, this humidor's not sealing well for me. It just really depends on at that point how deep you want to be invested in the, you know, in the culture and what you want to do. But in reality, there's a lot of great choices out there, right? So let's get into the next phase, right? You've chosen a humidor based upon the size, the finish, and the tier that you want to get, right? Obviously, now you're home. The first step is seasoning a humidor. What do you do there?
So obviously, there's a few different ways you can go about seasoning. I'm going to tell you how I do it. So step 1, you want to adhere your humidification unit to the top of the box. Once that's done, what I do is put the distilled water in a spray bottle. Spray the entire box down inside, wipe the excess down.
Yeah, or you could just get a clean cloth or sponge, something that's obviously new and clean, and just put distilled water on it. And wipe down all the inside, the cedar. You know, and you speaking of humidification devices, this is a common mistake I see people make. 50-50 solution, which goes into that element. I see people at times will get that and they'll season their box with that 50-50 solution.
That's a no-no.
That's a mistake. That'll actually stain the wood because it's 50% distilled water, but it's also 50% propylene glycol. That's meant for the element only, if you choose to use that element, not for seasoning the box. That's just straight up distilled water. So clean cloth, clean sponge, wipe down all the cedar, or as you said, a spray bottle. You know, obviously you want to saturate the wood, but not oversaturate. You don't want a puddle inside the humidor. But what you're doing there is you're seasoning that Spanish cedar, which is on the inside, that's kiln dried. So when you get that home, if you don't season the box, the humidification that comes out of that humidification device will get pulled right into the wood. So you're actually creating a barrier of humidification by seasoning with distilled water. And that's very, very important. And you know, and for me, what I like to do is, whether it's a spray bottle or I'm wiping it down with a clean cloth, whether it's dividers, if there's a shelf in there, the inside of the lid, anything that's that cedar, I wipe down, I close the humidor down, wait several hours, open it back up, and I do the process twice. And I wipe everything down again. And at that point, to me, once it's dried out, put the humidification device back on the lid, which is usually held by magnets. Put it back on there, and then you're ready to go and actually put your cigars in the humidor. But seasoning a humidor is extremely important because if you don't do that, you're going to have a problem keeping your humidity level up continuously.
That's correct.
So you have to season it properly. And the good news is there's a ton of information aside from what we're sharing with you as far as seasoning techniques, but you know, that's the most traditional way of doing it. If you do that, you're going to be halfway home.
So your next option will be the Boveda seasoning packs. Boveda has a seasoning pack, which is 84% humidity. So what you would do is, you would look on the back of the box and find out how many you need for how many the humidor holds.
Correct. Right, so basically the seasoning packs is a little bit of a slower process because you have to, depending on the size of the humidor, put as many packs as you would need. But you're talking about a timeline of maybe 5 days before you could put your cigars in your humidor. That's why the traditional method, for me, I like.
It's definitely faster.
It's quicker, and you know, I'm an impatient person by nature, so I like to expedite that.
Right.
So I do the traditional method.
Right.
Now, when it comes to the humidification of the humidor, that's where you have options. So whether you want to use the humidification unit that, you know, most of the time it's called foam oasis, the sponge device. If you want to adhere that to the lid, whether you use it or not, I think aesthetically I would always adhere it to the lid. But if you choose to use Boveda humidification packs, then you don't need that unit because you don't want them to fight each other. Even though Boveda is a two-way humidification system, and I kind of like the fact that you could pick your own humidity level. Obviously, depending on where you live in the country, whether it's cold, it's warm, the humidity levels are high. You know, so they have like 65, 69, 72, and 75.
But I think it's a little easier.
To me, it's easier because it's like it's set it and forget it.
Right.
Right. You put the
Ron Papil.
Correct. You put the pack amounts that you need in there, and then you're done for 3 months.
Yes.
And it's mindless. Like, it shouldn't be complicated. Listen, if you want to use the traditional method, 50-50 solution with the unit, the foam oasis, you're more of a traditionalist, then go for it.
Right.
I think for me, you know, it's a lot easier to use the Boveda packs.
Sure.
I traditionally choose 69% for me, regardless of the time of year for me, because it just keeps the cigars where I really want them. I get to choose my humidity level. You know, if it's a 50 count humidor, that's 2 packs. So the rule of thumb with Boveda is real simple: 1 pack for every 25 cigars it'll hold. You know, not many you keep in the box, because people say, well, you keep like 10 cigars at a time.
Yeah, you got to humidify the space in the box.
Right, so that's a good rule. So if I have a 50 count humidor, it's 2 packs at a time. Every 3 months, I just swap them out. The packs will get stiff. They actually tell you when they need to be replaced, and you just swap them out. But once you season the box, I mean, you know, you put your humidification device in, whether it's the unit it came with or you want to use Boveda, then you're off and running. Right. And then with Boveda, you got to replace them every 3 months, every 4 months, depending on the seal of your box. And then, you know, when it comes to seasoning, you know, we tell people at times, you know, in colder months sometimes, like I like as a rule of thumb, as the colder weather approaches here in the
Well, I was just going to say that. I was going to touch it. You definitely have to reseason the box. And also, I know you use 69. In the wintertime, I tend to go higher. I tend to go 75%.
Yeah, well, and some people will. And it really depends on, first of all, personal preference, how you like your cigars. You know, for me, I tend to smoke, obviously, a lot of stronger cigars when I'm home, for sure. And they to me, they need less humidity. I like to keep the humidity down a little bit because I think they smoke better there at that level. But, you know, to each their own. But you're definitely right. If you're living in an environment where it's very dry air.
Well, yeah, it's going to suck the moisture out of the box, so I go a little higher.
Correct. Because obviously there's air exchange. Every time you open the humidor, there's air exchange. If the air is obviously very dry, it's going to dry out the box. So, you know, you have to play with it. The one thing I would definitely tell people is don't overthink it. Cigars are sensitive, but they're not as sensitive as people sometimes make it out in their mind. And they stress about it. If it's not right on the screws, if it's not 70% humidity, 70 degrees, people have a tendency to panic. The one thing to remember, cooler is always better than warmer. Right? So having a humidor in a room that maybe be like 60 degrees, it's not going to hurt the cigars. So you want to avoid high temperatures, and of course you want to avoid even like high humidity. You don't want it to be too high because then your cigars will be plugged. But really, as you kind of play with it as a cigar enthusiast, you'll find the sweet spot for you, depending on, you know, geographically where you live and how you like your cigars. So just don't overthink it, right? These basic rules will get you kind of where you want to be. But that seasoning rule, doing it like as the seasons turn, I think is a good rule of thumb. You know, even the best humidors need that re-seasoning once a year, maybe. So I use it as a common practice. As the season changed, I re-season it, and I use the old school method. I just wipe it back down with distilled water, put my cigars back in there, and boom, I'm off from
there. So Maz, let's talk about hygrometers now.
Well, for me, the hygrometer has got to be digital.
I agree.
I mean, the analogs look nice. Traditionally, all humidors, especially as I was coming up, had a dial. An analog. And then when digitals became prevalent, I really embraced it. And what I like about them, a lot of the digitals, they'll come with a little Velcro in the back, which you could adhere to the lid of the box. But what I like to do, like, because I have several humidors at home, I don't use the adhesive. I don't use the Velcro. I just jump it. So I invest in one, and I jump it around the different boxes. Now, of course, if you don't want to do that, buy a digital for each box.
Right, right.
But a digital is way more accurate.
And the good thing about a digital hygrometer is it tells you your temperature also.
Temperature and humidity.
Yep.
So, if you want to be precise about your cigars and the way they're kept, I think the digital is the way to go. And for me, it's worth a little extra money. I mean, I think it's just, for me, it's peace of mind.
Right.
And I want that because I don't want to overthink it.
Right.
And the one thing we forgot to mention, Foch, when it comes to digital hygrometers, it's good to have because sometimes when you season a box and you think it's thoroughly seasoned, it might not quite be up to snuff at that point.
Right, right.
When you have the digital, it'll basically tell you. So like a lot of people at times when they first get a box, they season it and they just can't keep that humidity up. That just means that the humidor is not seasoned enough and properly.
Right.
That ensures that you properly season the humidor because it's holding humidity. It's not fluctuating down, back down. So the humidity is not getting pulled into that wood. This way, with that digital, if you're right on the screws consistently and you don't have those dips, that's how you know you seasoned the box well.
Right.
And you did it right. So Foch, how about for people out there that want to do like a do-it-yourself humidor, maybe like a Tupperware or something? How do you feel about that?
Well, listen, if you guys are not fully committed, I think that's a great way to go. What you would do is you would get a piece of Tupperware, throw some Boveda packs in it, a sponge with distilled water, something like that. That's going to keep your cigars fresh for you until you get your chance to smoke them.
Right, and then obviously there's some downfall to that, to be honest. I mean, and there's a ton of people, like I see our comments, that say cooler doors, Tupperwares are the way to go. This is what I use. And listen, that's great if that works for you. If it works for you and you like it, go ahead and do it.
Right.
But what you have there is lack of air exchange because plastic, once it seals, right, it doesn't breathe. Traditional humidors made of wood, it will breathe, right? And to me, it ensures that I'll get proper humidity when we're over humidified.
Right.
Because if you don't open that Tupperware or that cooler door, occasionally get that fresh air exchange.
Yeah, you need the air movement.
That air movement helps, right? Also, the aroma of a cigar a lot of times comes from the cedar. The Spanish cedar, the reason why cigars are put in Spanish cedar boxes and then obviously stored in humidors is because of the Spanish cedar. And that adds a level of aroma and flavor to a cigar. Now, some people might say that's bullshit, it doesn't matter to me, but as I said earlier, if a Tupperware or a cooler door is your thing and you swear by it, if it works for you, then go ahead and do it. But we have to let people out there know that obviously there's benefits to having a traditional humidor, being the fact that they breathe and also they add the aroma to a cigar, which I thoroughly enjoy.
Yeah.
Right?
I agree. And another thing, Maz, too, when you have a Tupperware, there's no insulation for temperature.
Like a wood box.
Correct, like a wood box. So your wood box is going to maintain the proper temperature over a Tupperware.
Correct. Yeah, I agree with that. Again, to each his own. I mean, I know people that swear by them, use them all the time, and there's some real collectors out there. At some point, they're like, I just can't get another humidor.
Right.
But they have overflow, so they use a cooler door or a Tupperware. And the most important thing is obviously to make sure the cigars don't get wet in any way.
Yeah.
Because I hear people say that I put a shot glass in there, and listen. Then you have to worry about like that spilling.
You hit the box. Yeah.
To me, use a traditional sponge device or use a Boveda packs, depending on the size of the vehicle. But to me, the most important thing is to make sure your cigars are going to get wet there. So obviously, there's many ways to skin a cat when it comes to keeping cigars fresh, and to each their own. But traditional wood humidor, cedar aroma, airflow, I just love all that about it. And let's face it, it's badass when you have a really beautiful humidor sitting on your end table, right? And people come over and you want to share cigars, and you open up that baby and you get that big waif of like that Spanish cedar.
And tobacco.
There's something very romantic about that. But if cooler doors are your thing, and listen, it's just about functionality, then go ahead and go for it.
Right. So now that you have your humidor all set up, it's time to add the cigars.
And there's a couple things to keep in mind. Location, location, location. Where you put your humidor in your house matters. You don't want it in direct sunlight or near a heating or air conditioning vent.
Right.
You want to keep it somewhere where it's actually going to just be safe from any direct sunlight for sure, and no air blowing on it for sure. And also, when it comes to humidity levels, in my opinion, the way to maintain optimal levels of humidity is to keep the proper amount of cigars in a humidor, right? So it's a 50 count humidor. You really don't want to have 5 cigars in there, but also you don't want to have 60 cigars. You don't want them crammed in there. For me, the optimal level of humidity is based upon the size of the humidor and how many cigars you keep in there. So I guess as a good rule of thumb, I like to say like at least 3/4 of the way filled at all times, because that keeps the proper and optimal humidity level.
Yeah, I'd agree, and it gives you more options to choose from on what you want to smoke.
Absolutely, which is always a great thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So there you have it. Everything you need to know about humidors. But we have a few pro tips for you.
So pro tip number 1, if your humidor is full and you keep your cigars for a long period of time, you want to rotate your cigars. If there's only a few cigars in there, I wouldn't bother, but if you have 20, 25, something like that, definitely rotate your cigars.
Yeah, that's a great tip as far as top to bottom, bottom to top rotation of cigars. To me, it's optimal humidity for all your cigars.
Correct.
The other pro tip is that I have, if you weren't really paying attention during this video and you find your cigars are over humidified, they're just too soft, they're just not drawing for you, you're not smoking well, dry box the cigar. What dry boxing means is you get a cigar, you feel it, it doesn't feel right. Even if you cut it and give it a cold draw, you realize you're not getting any air, that means you're not getting any smoke. Dry boxing, it means you just close the humidor down, you set the cigar on top of the humidor and you let it sit for a day or two. Dry boxing is the way to go because the humidity will come and leach out of the cigar, and when you find yourself drawing that cigar, a lot of the times it has to do with improper humidification, it's over humidified. So dry boxing is a pro tip that honestly I didn't even know for the longest time when I first started smoking cigars, and it saved a lot of cigars that I thought were actually ready to go and actually ready to trash. For me, dry boxing is a pro tip, right? So I want to thank you all for joining us. Hopefully you enjoyed the video, but I'm sure there's more questions out there. You have questions, drop us a comment, we'll answer them. But before we depart, make sure you hit that like button,
smash the subscribe button,
and we'll see you here next time.